Battle Chasers Nightwar is a continuation of the comic book series under the same name that last got an issue in 2001. This JRPG throwback touches on classic gameplay mechanics of the genre, while also introducing its own unique twist to it. While the game takes place in an established comic book series, you don't really need to read the series to play and understand the context of this video game. You definitely feel more connected to the events and the characters if you do read the comic book series before, but if you just randomly come across the game when looking for a new RPG to play, then you'll be fine with understanding the story as well. You play as Gully and her group of warriors consisting of a swordsman, a kind giant robot, and a wizard. The group does expand over the course of the game though, with a total of 6 playable characters to choose from. The overarching story of the series has the group looking for Gully's missing father, investigating what his last mission was. Nightwar in particular has the group's airship get shot down by bandits over a mysterious island drenched in mana, the magic currency in this game used to cast magic attacks. Upon crash landing on the island below, the cast of characters have to try to regroup and get off the island. Of course, things aren't going to be that easy because the surge of mana attracts some pretty interesting obstacles. As something that originated from a comic book series, it's really cool to see the fully animated cutscenes in the very same art style as the comic book with this game, accompanied with voice acting for the characters. The little conversations between characters inside of a shop or at an inn are the standout moments in this game for me. I thought the 25+ hour story was pretty basic for a narrative, but the characters seemed really cool. I just wish that the conversations that hinted at some sort of side story or background development for these characters would actually lead to it. Regardless, the story does what it needs to service the much better and impactful gameplay, which is what the real selling point of this game is. Nightwar follows many traditional gameplay mechanics set up by JRPGs of the past, such as Final Fantasy. Combat is a turn-based 3-party system with a unique battle mechanic called Overcharge. When in battle, your characters each have their own HP and mana gauges, but as you perform basic attacks, you'll earn something called Overcharge or Red Mana. This can be used in place of actual mana. It adds a new sense of strategy and risk and reward to the battle system. Traditionally, RPGs have the player use physical attacks and magic attacks that slowly trickle down your magic gauge. Battle Chaser switches that up to some extent by rewarding players who perform physical attacks with more mana. In that sense, the player now has to analyze and determine when it's appropriate to use physical attacks to gather your overcharge and when to unleash powerful magic attacks. Later on in the game, you'll get stronger burst-like attacks that are unlocked as your team deals more damage to the enemy and fills up this special meter. The analyzation of these battle sequences starts off pretty simple, but gets increasingly difficult as you progress through the game. If you don't adapt to the system early on and just bat and mash your way through the introduction, you'll quickly get your butt handed to you. Now outside of the battles, you'll find the overworld that looks sort of like a linear sandbox. Here you'll come across NPCs, campsites, towns, and a handful of enemies. Let's start off with that actually, the enemies. Battle Chasers ditches the whole random encounter mechanism popular with JRPGs and instead has the enemies show up on the map view. Here you can determine which enemies lie ahead and on which routes they're on to sort of map out your plans for reaching an objective. Running into these enemies jumps us into a battle, and you'll constantly find yourself doing this to raise your character's stats as you grind for XP to level them up. This is diving into the RPG elements of Battle Chasers. Just like most RPG systems, you can raise your character's stats, equip them with armor, accessories, and weapons that vary in stats and effects that will surely alter your battle experience. You can earn these items in battle, find them scattered throughout dungeons, or just straight up buy them from shops and towns. Usually these items feature a buff and debuff of some type. For example, armor tends to raise your character's HP and speed, but also lowers your character's defenses. You'll have to find the right combination of items to counterbalance all these debuffs. However, you'll find that while equipment can be useful, grinding and leveling up your character is usually the best course of action when needing to fight a stronger enemy. Backtracking a bit to the topic of shop, you'll use gold as your currency to buy things like armor, but also elixirs and potions that can be a big help in battles. Gold, however, isn't the easiest thing to come by. You'll learn some in battles and find some in treasure chests, but usually not in big quantities. What you'll want to do is sell your item duplicates or items that you simply don't need to raise up your gold and buy new equipment. You can also forge new items using recipes and different items you find in treasure chests or in barrels. What I think is really clever with this forge system is that it'll tell you the bare minimum needed for something like a health potion, but then you can also throw in extra quantities of said ingredients than what the recipe calls for to potentially get an even better version of what you were originally going to craft. Have you ever played an RPG where you ask yourself, why the heck am I carrying this many broken twigs or leaf blades if I don't really need them that much? Well, the forge system in this game tries to tackle that issue. Now aside from the equipment, you'll earn skill points when you start to level up. These points can be invested into your characters in a sort of skill tree system that increases different battle stats of your character. For example, you can increase Garrison's chance of landing a critical hit, or increase Gully's starting attack stat. Now in the overworld, you'll find 8 main story dungeons that you'll have to explore in order to finish the game, but there's also mini dungeons or exploration areas for you to venture into as well. These exploration areas put you in top-down views where you can find treasure chests, run into enemies, and progress through the game's main narrative. These dungeons are actually randomized to some extent too. While the room designs don't actually change, the layout and order of these rooms do. This lets you go back and replay dungeons for those times where you need to quickly get some XP grinding done. It sort of helps the game feel less repetitive, but only by a really short margin. You can also change up the difficulty of these dungeons too. Making them harder actually tends to reward you with better unlockables. I'd recommend JRPG veterans out there to tackle the dungeons in heroic mode. Outside of the core gameplay are mini games that you can participate in, such as fishing and customized hunts, where usually your objective is to go after a specific type of creature. It does feel a bit tacked on to the core gameplay, but it does add a bit more variety to it if that's what you're looking for. Battle Chasers looks fantastic. It comes from comic book origins, but it translates incredibly well into a video game from a graphical standpoint. Every few hours you'll be treated to a nice fully animated cutscene that looks like it's something from a comic book suddenly come to life. As for the artwork during traditional gameplay, it sort of reminds me of Dragon's Crown, and I really dig it. Much like its visual counterpart, Battle Chaser's audio design and choice of music is superb. Despite playing through hundreds of battles, I never really got tired of the battle music nor the victory tunes that played at the end of matches. They all tended to be pretty catchy. The real standout here though is the voice acting. I was honestly pretty surprised how well the characters were voiced, especially considering that this game is a Kickstarter project with not the biggest budget around. Despite that though, characters' personalities and motives translate pretty well in the game. I just wish there was a bit more dialogue scenarios in the game because of how great they are. Battle Chasers Nightwar is a really great looking game when it comes to its presentation. Artwork literally looks like a comic book come to life with great fluid animation and voice acting that really brings the comic book into a new dimension. I just wish that the characters were fully voice acted, though I sort of understand the limits of the budget for this game. The gameplay follows traditional JRPG tropes while also adding its own unique twist to it with the overcharged battle system. With that said, despite its best efforts, after about 20 hours of gameplay, that repetitive gameplay feeling was really starting to hit me and I was just sort of pushing for the game to end already. I think if the story was a bit more enticing along with more backstory and side stories focused on specific characters, I'd be a bit more invested into the game despite the gameplay feeling repetitive towards the end. If you are still thinking about getting this game despite it not having the best story or some pretty repetitive gameplay towards the end of the game, I'd say go with the PC version because of the price and performance. Currently, some PS4 owners are reporting that the game tends to crash and also has much longer loading times than the PC version. Though luckily because there is an autosave feature in the game, those people experiencing crashes on PS4 aren't losing any save data. The game developers have acknowledged the issue and are working on patches right now, but it's still something I wanted to acknowledge in this review. But that does it for my review of Battle Chasers Nightwar for the PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. If you have any questions about the game, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below. And if you enjoy reviews just like this, then please consider dropping a like and subscribing. It really helps the channel out and it helps it grow, so I really do appreciate it. As always, thank you all very much for watching, hope you have a great day, and keep on gaming.